That's such an edgy way to live.
But the dad nails it every Christmas. You open up the present, you're like, Dad waited until Christmas Eve, and yet he got me the skis I wanted, or the golf clubs I wanted, or the kitchen stuff I wanted. That's the Clippers. They ultimately nail it. They procrastinate. It takes them till like game 4, game 3, game 6, and you're like, wow, they're easily the best team in this series.
Are you a procrastinator?
No, I'm the opposite. I want to get stuff. I don't like anxiety.
See, that's what it is. For certain things, I am not a procrastinator, but there's just a couple things that I procrastinate on, and I think that's what it is. Like, I don't like the anxiety, but there is a little bit of a thrill to waiting till Christmas Eve, and then everyone's at the store and you're rushing to get everything you need. I think that's what it is. I think I'm the opposite of a procrastinator. I've gotten more so in my later years, and I think sometimes my curtness is not great. Like, I would rather tell somebody, if there was somebody that wasn't working, hey, we're going to fire you. I still love you, but it doesn't work. I would rather go do that in 30 seconds from now. I don't need a lead up. I don't need to think about it, because I never want anybody to BS me. Well, that's fair. Yep.
So I think everybody's getting BS. I think politicians BS, our kids BS us, the parents BS, our bosses BS us.
Yeah, you're just wasting people's time.
Yeah, so I tend to be curt, and it's really off-putting to a lot of people. But I can't procrastinate.
Well, but I think because most people are procrastinators. But that's a good way of putting in perspective what the Clippers are.
Yeah, they're always
or
great.
Maybe
It just takes forever.
They're an older team, so you just got to take a little time to get warmed up. You get out of bed in the morning, you can't just hop up like you used to. You got to get the joints oiled a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe it's that.
Very fair. So Cedric Sabalas is great. He'll be joining us in a couple of minutes. So Scottie Pippen's got a new book. As Rick Bucher said, it should be called Axe to Grind. He writes a book because Michael Jordan did the 10-part documentary, which was wonderful. And to me, Jordan's documentary was accurate, but it did lean toward Michael's direction. That's what documentaries do. What was that one that was really popular, Making a Murderer? It leaned toward the victim. A lot of it, the documentarians lean toward the victim. My wife's like, oh, I can't believe he's in jail. And I'm like, oh, he tortured animals. I'm over. The reality is, whoever does the documentary, it ain't journalism, folks. They're documentaries. It leans toward the person making the documentary. Michael's documentary leaned toward Michael. But I lived through it, and it was accurate. It just was a little more favorable to Michael than it was anybody else. Whereas Scotty's book feels like Axe to Grind. Now, we were talking about the term, and Joy and I agree, Scotty's always been viewed exactly as he should be viewed. A great Robin. Now, there's always been the feeling he's the best Robin of all time. I've said that. So I went this morning and really examined this. Who are the best Robins of all time? What does that mean if you just turn to our show and don't understand what that term means? It means on a great team, you were the second best player or the second most noteworthy player. So the greatest Robin of all time is actually Kobe Bryant. During the Shaq-Kobe rivalry, Shaq was the greater player, and if it wasn't for free throws, he would have gotten all the shots late. It was Shaq's team. Now, Kobe's a 5-time NBA champ, a 2-time finals MVP, one of the 10 best players I've seen. But in that dynasty, Kobe was viewed as the 2. He was very, very young. That's the best Robin ever. The second best is Jerry Rice, viewed as the best wide receiver ever. He has the most receiving yards in NFL history and the most touchdown receptions in NFL history. But it was Montana's dynasty. Nobody disputes that. Montana was the MVP in Super Bowls. Jerry Rice was the second greatest Robin of all time. The third is Mark Messier. Yes, I know hockey. When he was in Edmonton, that was one of the great hockey teams of all time, the dynasty in Edmonton. Gretzky, the great one, was number 1. Messier was one of the top 5 players in the sport, maybe top 3. He was the 2. 6-time Stanley Cup champ, 5 with the Oilers. He goes then and becomes the Batman with the Rangers and leads them to a Stanley Cup final. One of the great tough guys ever. Could skate, tough, could score. Mark Messier, third best Robin ever. 4, and this is weird, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yes, the leading scorer in league history was a Robin on the Showtime Lakers. When you watch the highlights of the Showtime Lakers, it's almost all magic. It's often other Lakers beyond Kareem. Kareem is a 6-time MVP, most ever. in NBA history, one of the great defenders, the most unstoppable shot. But on the Showtime Lakers, it was really Magic's team. The fifth best Robin of all time is, I know it's weird, Bill Belichick. We can now say it was 60-40 minimum Brady over Belichick. So Bill struggled to win in Cleveland without Brady. He could not win early in New England without Brady, and he could not win last year without Brady. Tom wins New England. Tom leaves, wins Super Bowl in Tampa. Belichick is the greatest, fifth greatest Robin of all time. Number 6, the beloved Dwayne Wade. On the Heatles, he was a Robin. 13-time All-Star, top 20, 25 player of all time, was never a great shooter. He was always kind of the soul of a team, but he wasn't as dominating when Shaq came and they won, not as dominating physically as LeBron when they won. He's the 6th best Robin of all time. Now, sometimes he was asked to, like Kareem, to be a Batman, but in the greatest moments for the Heat, he's been a Robin. Number 7, I know I'm going way back, Lou Gehrig. He actually won 2 MVPs, one of them playing with Babe Ruth. He was a 6-time World Series champ. He was the Yankee captain for about 6-7 years. On those teams with Ruth, there were moments he was actually the better player. Number 8 would be John Stockton, right? Karl Malone ends up top 5 scorer of all time. John made 10 NBA All-Star teams. It's interesting, we never talk about him in the Robin conversation. He's one of the top 5 point guards ever, probably behind Magic, Steph, Isaiah Thomas. Then you get into the John Stockton conversation. Rock solid, only played with Karl Malone as a star. Number 9, I think you'd have to say Gronk. Arguably the greatest tight end of all time. 5-time Pro Bowler, all with Brady. The Brady to Gronk is the most prolific touchdown duo in NFL history with 14. Nobody's ever had more touchdowns in the NFL. That the quarterback to receiver thing, that's number 1. 14, Gronk. And then number 10, I think you put in Scottie Pippen. Because we started using the term with him. He's also a 6-time champ. He's also a 7-time All-Star. I would argue he was a much better defensive player than he actually was a skilled offensive player. But he was a great Robin, and he always understood it was Michael's team. Michael got the last shot. For the record, Tony Kukoc isn't the only guy to get the last shot. Often, when he was on the floor, Kerr got the last shot. Paxson got the last shot. Sometimes Kukoc got the shot. But Scottie qualifies, to me, as the 10th best Robin of all time. And I don't think it's a shot. Now, some people aren't Robins their entire career. Marc Messier became the guy in New York. But if you're telling me for an extended period of time, I mean, Kobe was a Robin for like 4 years. In fact, I would say Del Harris before Phil Jackson, Kobe was the Robin for like 5 to 6 years. And then Shaq leaves. Then they get Gasol, and then the rest of his career, he's the guy. Kind of crazy, right? Yeah, I know what you're thinking this morning. You're just taking shots at Pippen, but is Pippen better than Gronk all time?
Well, we just always default to those Bulls teams as just one of the greatest dynasties in sports, which, you know, you could argue the Patriots is a more dominant dynasty, and they were almost 20 years. So, like, if you really start breaking it down, these might start to slide a little bit. We just default to Michael Jordan's the greatest, and he didn't win without Scottie.
Yeah.
Which is why it's like when you start complaining, then people start actually questioning your legacy. Like, wait a minute. We always have said you were just the best Robin.
By the way, McHale was the Robin to Larry Bird. And I think McHale was comfortable with that. The difference is Scottie is comfortable being the Robin because I think he knows it, but he feels the documentary minimized his value. And I did when I watched the documentary, I thought it was very clear that Michael felt Scottie was essential to it. But there were so many personalities and so many weird moments in that Bulls dynasty that Scottie wasn't talked about a ton. Jerry Krause got talked about. Phil got talked about. Rodman, who's not nearly as good as Pippen, got talked about.
Well, sometimes when you aren't extremely problematic and you do play your role, you don't get necessarily the credit for what that type of value brings. You focus more on the negative things. You focus more on Rodman dipping out to Vegas in the middle of a series. Like, you focus on things like that and not, you know, it can become boring to talk about. And, you know, Scottie was there and doing his job. Like, that's what happens when you do your job. Sometimes people get so used to you being consistent that you don't necessarily talk about it.
That's John Stockton's career. He just gave you 11 assists every night, and it just the way it was. And he's 16 points, 11 assists, played great defense.
And then you talk about stars being selfish, like that can sometimes be what everyone focuses on as well. Like we're in Hollywood. People ask for crazy things. I want only vanilla, sprinkles on my ice cream, or I'm going to throw a fit.
Is that needy?
I don't know that I don't know that it's needy. Yeah, it's needy, but like when you're a star, that's what it is. And sometimes the number two is just there, just does their job and shows up every day. And you're like, okay, I don't have to give you that attention because you don't necessarily need it. And then that becomes a problem. And that's probably where Scottie is right now.
Let's bring in Cedric Ceballos, 11 years in the NBA. He played with stars. He was an all-star. He was a slam dunk champ.